Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we are going to learn how to create candy cane inspired text in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions that I'm making right off the bat. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2017. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows. If you're using a Mac, then when I say hit the Control key on the keyboard, that means hit the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard, that means hit the Option key. So with that out of the way, let's begin by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up the new image dialog box. Now what we want to do is we want to have a perfect square to work with to create our pattern for our candy cane text. So what we're going to do is we're going to name our new image is going to be candy cane pattern. Okay, we're going to make it a width of 500 pixels, a height of 500 pixels, resolution of 150 pixels per inch, RGB color 8-bit. Background is going to be pure white, but we're going to turn it off so it really doesn't matter what color it is. Adobe RGB 1998 and square pixels. Hit create, and we are now ready to begin making our candy cane pattern. Now, first thing that you need to do is we need to get a center guideline, and the way that we do that is we have to have our ruler showing. So hit Control R if you do not see your rulers, or you can go here to View and then down to Rulers. Make sure that that is checked. Once you see your rulers, click on the left-hand ruler and drag outwards to create a guideline, and when it snaps to the center of your image, let go and you now have a center line for your image. Next, what we're going to do is change our foreground color to this nice bright red, which is C90303. Once you have your foreground color at the appropriate red, let's go and choose our rectangle tool. You can do that by hitting U on the keyboard or by clicking on the rectangle tool here on your toolbar. Make sure that it is on shape, and fill must be the red of your foreground. Stroke is nothing, and everything else doesn't matter. Then we're going to draw a nice thin-ish stripe like so. Then go back to our move tool by hitting V on the keyboard, and then you can move this to the center line, and when it snaps in place, let go. We now have our beginnings of our candy cane design. So next what we're going to do is duplicate this and move it to the far right. So hit Alt and Shift and then click and drag, and that will create a copy. And once it snaps to the center right off screen so that half of it is off and half of it is still on your image, let go, and you now have half of it on and half of it off on the right-hand side. We then want to change this color to a slightly darker red to give the red some difference. So click on the properties over here. If you don't see the properties, you can just double-click or just click once or twice here, and it will come up with a color picker, and then you can just choose the color that you want. And the color that I'm using is 9D0808, which is a darker red than the original bright red that we had. So hit OK, and we are now ready with that side. So now what we want to do is have this darker red one also on the left-hand side. So hit Alt, Shift, and then click and drag to the left until it snaps to the midway point like that. And you now have a pattern that will repeat over and over with red on the outside and red on the inside. But we don't really want it to be this plain, because if you ever look at candy canes, they usually have a little bit more variation, maybe some green and maybe some very thin red lines in them. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to make the thin lines next. So let's go back to our original red here on the Layers palette, which is rectangle 1 for me. And we're going to then hit Alt and Shift and then drag over until we have another copy of it. Then we're going to hit Control T to transform it, and then we're going to drag it in until it's a nice thin red line like so. Hit Enter on your keyboard and you've got your nice thin red line. Let's hit Alt and Shift and then click and drag that red line out until we have two red lines like so. And then we're going to select both of those red lines like that, and we're going to move them over slightly so that they are about there-ish. Then we're going to select both of them again, and we're going to click and then hold down Alt and Shift. Whoops, that's wrong. Control Z. We are going to hit Alt first, and then click and Shift and drag until we have a second one like so. Perfect. let go. Then we want the original red one again so that we can put some green next to it. So we're going to click on our original rectangle layer again, and we're going to duplicate it by dragging downwards to the add new layer, and that will create a copy. Then go to the bottommost one, the original rectangle one, and then we're going to hit Control T on the keyboard to bring up transform. And we're going to drag this outwards a little bit like so. Doesn't matter how far you go because we're going to tweak this slightly in just a moment. Hit enter to accept that change, and then we're going to give this a layer style. So we're going to go down here to layer style, blending options, and the first thing that we're going to do is take the fill opacity and we're going to lower that to 0 so you no longer see it down here. Move this up to make it easier to see. Then what we're going to do is go to stroke, and we're going to give this a stroke size of 10, outside, normal, opacity of 100%, color, and the color that we're using is this nice bright green of 32A106. We're then going to hit OK. Hit OK again, and these lines look a little too far away, so we're going to hit Control T again, and we're going to move it a little bit closer like so. Perfect. And then these lines look like they're a little far away, so let's move them a little bit closer, just like that. Looks good, and then we'll do this side to make it match, and just like that. There we go. So now we have our pattern for our candy cane. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn off the background because we no longer need that for our candy cane, and we are going to then turn this into a pattern. And the way that we do that is going up here to edit, and we're going to go to define pattern, just like that. And we're going to name this candy cane pattern. That's the name of our file. That's what we're going to call it. Hit OK. And we are done with that. Now, you can save this candy cane pattern. You don't need to, but you might want to. So if you do want to, save it and name a candy cane pattern and put it away. Right now, what we're going to do is create a brand new document. So hit Control N on the keyboard to bring up your new image dialog box. And then let's create a brand new file that's going to be called candy cane text. And we're going to make our width 3,840 pixels by 2160 pixels by 150 pixels per inch, RGB color 8-bit. And the background color that we're going to use is a nice bright blue, which is 9ED7EF. Then we're going to hit OK, and we're going to use Adobe RGB 1998 and square pixels. Hit Create, and we now have our new image to work with. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply that candy cane pattern to a blank and empty layer. And then we're going to save that for later use. So what we're going to need to do now is create a brand new layer. Now you can click on Create New Layer down here on your Layers palette, or you can hit Control, Alt, Shift, and N on your keyboard to create a brand new layer. Let's name this layer Stripes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to fill this with a color. So just doesn't matter what color, hit Alt and Backspace to fill it with a color. You got to select it first, Alt, Backspace, and it fills with the color. Red's fine, doesn't matter. Then you're going to go down to your layer styles, and you're going to go to blending options, and we're going to turn our fill opacity all the way down to 0. Like I said, the color didn't matter. We only needed a color so that we can apply a pattern overlay to it. So what we want this to do, what we want this to be now is we want to do a normal blend mode. Opacity is going to be 100%. The pattern that we're using is our brand new pattern, which will be at the bottom of whatever your patterns you have showing at the moment. Candy cane pattern 500 by 500 pixels. So there is our candy cane pattern. Okay, and what we're going to do is we are going to change its scale all the way to 50%. Okay, so you can just type in 50% there, and you now have a candy cane pattern. Hit OK, and then what we can do is we can collapse the layer effects, and then we can turn it off. We don't need it yet. It's there for us to use very soon. Next up, we're going to unlock our background by clicking on the little lock icon there, and then we're going to rename this as Sky. Once we have renamed that as Sky, we're going to give it a layer style. So we're going to go down here to Effects, and what we're going to do is we're going to apply a pattern overlay to this layer. It's not going to be the same pattern overlay that we just used. But what we're going to do is we're going to name this as Screen is going to be the blend mode. So let's find screen. Then the opacity that we're using is going to be 60%, so make it 60. Pattern that we're going to use is going to be weave, okay? And weave is this guy right here, and you can find that over here under the sprocket all the way down here at Textures Fill 2. Okay, so that's where you can find weave, and then weave is right here. So click on weave, and then the scale that we want is going to be at 1000%, which is all the way to the right. And that gives us a nice snowy, icy kind of feel to our sky. So let's hit OK, and we are then done with the sky. The next thing that we need to do is create a brand new layer above sky that we're going to name snow. So let's hit Control Alt Shift and N on our keyboard yet again. Then let's double click and name this snow. And now we are ready to create our snow. So what we're going to use for that is the pen tool. Hit P on the keyboard or click on the pen tool right here on the toolbar. What you want to do is make sure that it is shape. Make the fill pure white, so make sure that it is white. Stroke is nothing, so none of these other things matter. So then what you're going to do is somewhere around the bottom third, just right outside of the image itself, draw a point and click and drag out like that. That will give your point a little curve when you make the next point. So let's make another point right here, a little bit of a curve. Just click and drag it like that, and that will give you all that you need for your snow to look like it's on the ground. Okay, and there we go, and there's that. And once you're off again, then you can just do straight lines off of the page, and when you get back to your original up here, the pen will get this little circle on the bottom of it, and all you have to do is click there, and that closes the path, and now you have a closed path that is all ready. So that is our shape. Oh, it created a new shape up there, so we want to put that down there, get rid of snow, and let's just name shape as snow. There we go. We now have our new shape layer of snow. Now what we want to do is make this look a little bit more like snow. We're going to give it a pattern. So we're going to go down to our effects again, and we're going to give this a pattern overlay. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this hard light. So let's go to hard light. And we're going to make the opacity is going to be all the way down at only 8%. And the pattern that we're using can be found under texture, the first one, texture fill. You don't need to you do want to replace the current patterns. Now, if you want to save, before we do that, if you want to save your pattern here, all you have to do is go to the sprocket here and go to Preset Manager, right? And then click on this and then hit Save Set, because it will save just that one pattern as a set. Name it whatever you want, and then you're done with that, because we're going to replace all of our patterns here. So let's click over here. We'll go down to Texture Fill 1 now that we're ready to get rid of everything here and replace the current patterns. Hit OK and save the changes. No, we don't need to. Then what we're looking for over here is called Driven Snow. And Driven Snow, I believe, is this guy right here. Nope. Where is Driven Snow? Let's find Driven Snow, everybody. There it is. It's the second from the top, second from the left. So Driven Snow is right there, 200 by 200 pixels. There you go. Now the scale that we want it to be at is going to be 300. So we want it to be 300. So there you can see this looks a lot more like snow. Hit OK, and we are now done with all the background that we need for this. So now what we can do is create a new layer for our font. Okay, we don't even need to create a new layer. We're just going to go to our text tool, which is T on the keyboard, or you can click on the text tool here. We're going to make sure that we are using the font that we like. Now I have a link in the description below to the font that I am using, which is called Bubble Body New. Okay, I'm using regular at 300 points, sharp, centered, and the color that I'm using is going to be white. So then what we also want to do is we want to make sure under character here, if you don't see character for your font, go to Window and go to Character. Okay, and then what we'll do is we want to make sure that our kerning here is at -25. We want the letters to be a little closer together than they normally are. So you want to go here to kerning and you want to make it -25. Okay, then we can click and we can start writing whatever we want. For this, like always, I will do Pixel Magic. like so. Once you're ready, you hit the check mark to accept your changes. Then we'll use our move tool, V on the keyboard, to move our text to the center like so. Once we have that, we're going to apply a layer style to our text. So let's go to our layer styles here. And the first one that we're going to do is bevel and emboss. Now the bevel and emboss that we're going to use is going to be inner bevel. Technique is smooth. Depth is going to be 126%. Direction is up. Size is going to be 43. Soften is going to be 16. Shading, we're going to uncheck use global light, and it's going to be 130 degrees, and it's going to be 60 degree altitude. Our gloss contour is going to be this guy right here, which is cone inverted. Anti-alias is checked. Our highlight mode is going to be linear dodge add. It's going to be pure white, so that's all Fs, and opacity is going to be 100%. Shadow mode, oddly enough, is also going to be linear dodge add, and we're going to use a very, very light red color. We're going to use FFEEEE, okay? Then what we're going to do is the opacity is going to be 65%, and that's all that we need for bevel and emboss. Next thing that we're going to do is we're going to give it an inner shadow, and the inner shadow is going to be a blend mode of linear burn, and the color that we're using is pure black. Opacity is going to be at 42%. Angle is going to be -40. Make sure that use global light is unchecked. Distance needs to be 19. Choke is 0. Size is 87. Contour is linear. And anti-alias is off. Noise, we're going to give it slight noise of 2%. Next up, we're going to give it an inner glow. So we're going to do a blend mode of linear burn. Opacity is going to be 34%. Noise is going to be 0%. The color that we're using is a deeper red, which is 422121. Hit OK. Technique is going to be softer. Source is going to be the edge. Choke is 10%. Size is 38 pixels. Contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is off. Now linear, in case I didn't mention it, is the very first one, the default. Range we're going to use of 70% and jitter of 0%. Next up is going to be satin. So we're going to give it a little bit of a satin look to it. We're going to use a blend mode of linear burn. And the color that we're using is this kind of very deep, darkish, kind of grayish blue, which is 507272. Hit OK, and opacity is 23%. Angle is going to be 17 degrees. Distance is 250 pixels. Size is 95 pixels. The contour that we're using is this one here called Gaussian. Anti-alias is unchecked. Invert is checked. Make sure invert is checked or you don't see anything when you're using satin. Next up is going to be a drop shadow just to help it separate our text from the background. So you're going to turn on drop shadow, and the blend mode is going to be normal. Black is our color, so that's all zeros. Opacity is going to be 53%. Angle is 135 degrees. Use global light, as always, is unchecked. Distance is 10 pixels. Spread is 0. Size is 18 pixels. Contour is going to be linear. Anti-alias is checked, and noise is 0. Layer knocks out drop shadow is checked. And that's all that we need for our text. Now you're thinking to yourself, well, where is the candy cane look? Well, all of the effects that we just did to the text is going to give it that kind of candy cane, candy-ish look to it. And the stripes that we created before is going to make this look like it's candy canes. So what we have to do now is we need to turn on our stripes layer. Then we want to right-click on it, rasterize the layer style. So click on rasterize the layer style. Once you've done that, then we're going to make stripes a clipping mask to the text. And the way that we do that is you put your mouse in between the stripes layer and your text layer, hold down Alt on the keyboard, and it will turn into this little box with an arrow. That means that it is turning into a clipping mask. So you click on that now, and you can see it's only inside our text. But having vertical stripes on your text just doesn't give it the same feel that you would expect for candy cane text. So the way that we're going to give this candy cane text the proper look is we're going to rotate these stripes. And we're going to do that by hitting Control-T on the keyboard to bring up the transform tool for our stripes layer. And then we're going to rotate this around. Now, I've experimented a few times, and you can freeform it just by moving your mouse outside of the transform box, and it will turn into this little curved double arrow. And then you can just turn your text like so, and it will turn however you want. Now, I have found through experimentation that I personally like 32 degrees. I think that that looks best. Now you can see over here on the right-hand side that my stripes aren't covering all of my lettering. So what we're going to do is we're going to click and drag out on the top part in the middle right here, and that will stretch it as far as it needs to be stretched, both up and down. You can do it any way you want. And now it covers all of my letters. Once we're happy with the way that it looks, hit the check mark to accept that change, and we now have what looks like pretty good candy cane text. But the stripes, I feel, are a little bit too strong. They're a little bit too easy to see, and they distract, and it's much harder to read the text. So what we're going to do is we're going to blur those slightly. And the way that we're going to do that and still keep our stripes is we're going to convert our stripes to a smart object and then apply a blur. So let's right click here and let's go to convert to smart object. Our stripes are now a smart object, and now we can go up here to filter and we can go to blur, and then we can go to Gaussian blur, and it only needs a small slight blur to it to make it look more realistic like it does. So you can do just a radius of 2, I have found works very well, but feel free to experiment and find what looks good to your eyes. Hit OK, and we now have finished candy cane inspired text in Photoshop. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. Once again, this is Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.